All right, so welcome to our next podcast of Seasoned Couples. And we've got some of our good friends, Bryan and Bianca Jackson, are with us today. And so, Bryan and Bianca, we actually met at church. So, we've known them for several years. And they've got a wonderful family. And so, we just want to make sure that we share some good information for our couples. So, I'm going to kick it over to you, Bryan, to introduce you guys, and we'll go into the podcast.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for having us. As Nanette said, we're Bryan and Bianca Jackson. We've been married for 25 years. We have four amazing kids. My oldest daughter is Brianna. She's 25. Brandon, he's 22. Brooke is a junior in high school. She's 16. And we have a freshman. So we're at the end of the tunnel. So she's a freshman in high school at 14.
Almost there. So, all of our couples have been sharing with us the story behind how they met because we find that there's always a story, right? So, can you guys share with us your story and how you guys met as a couple?
Well, there are two versions to the story. I have the right version. He tells this other version, and I think it's slightly off. But so the amazing thing is, we actually met in high school, but thank God we didn't date in high school. Had we probably would not be together now. But I had a friend in high school, and when she would see him around campus, she would always comment on this good-looking kid, Bryan Jackson. And so I would see him, but she would point him out all the time. And so it was just a casual hi and bye. We never engaged one another. But I was actually at LSU, sitting in the cafeteria, being very prayerful about my next steps because I was a graduating senior. And I was actually sitting and praying by myself in the cafeteria, just talking to God, and in comes this good-looking guy with two beautiful women on either side, right? And they're laughing, having a good time, and the girls were so enthralled with him, they didn't even know they were bumping the back of my chair. I'm thinking, what's going on here? I'm trying to stay in my prayer closet in the middle of the cafeteria.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I was praying, and the things that I was praying for at that time included a mate, the right mate. And I said, Lord, someone like him, right? Good, tall, good looking, apparently having a great time. That's what I wanted. And that was the end of it. And, I finished my lunch and I was walking back to my dorm, and I didn't realize he walked out. And he said, hey, is your name Bianca McWilliams? And I looked at him and I said, yes, it is. How do you know my name? And from there, that's where the story gets kind of muddy.
So, Bianca, he walked in with not one, but two women. What?
Good-looking girls. I can love on some sisters. They were some good-looking girls.
Truth be told, I worked in the female dorm, and they were freshmen. I was a junior at the time, and so I was trying to be a good big brother to him. Mm-hmm. That's my story.
From that point on, we talked as we were both walking back to our dorms, and we exchanged numbers. I did offer to tutor him in a subject that was probably my worst subject in college. I don't know why.
Yeah, I know why.
And then from that point, we talked on the phone, and we've been connected ever since.
Wow.
Okay.
And Bryan, and when did you know that Bianca was the one for you?
Well, so just to add on to Bianca's story, and this connects to the question you asked, right? When we were in high school, Bianca was a senior, and I was like a 5'4", 115-pound freshman. So when she talks about we never dated, I have a good understanding of why we never dated. So when we met on college, I had the Captain America serum, and so growth and transformation.
Yes, you did.
So,
That's right.
So you don't think you caught her eye in high school?
definitely not. If I did, it was like, hey, somebody stop the bullies from picking on that
kid. But after you had your Captain America serum, you look.
Yeah, exactly. She was like, all right, now let me tutor you in this class.
I love it.
But that being said, so we met one year, and then going through high school and college, for whatever reason, never dated anything. I always compared the girls that I dated to Bianca, and so when we had a chance to meet, I already knew that she was the one based on all those years of mental preparation and I guess fantasy. And for once, the fantasy was even, the reality was even better than the fantasy.
Oh, wow.
Thank you,
Oh, well, that is absolutely beautiful. So you had a crush on her, not crush. Yeah, we're going to use the word crush since high school.
Yeah, it was a crush.
Okay.
It was a crush. And it took 6 years of perfection. I was taking notes and working on my routine. But when it came time to perform, I went ahead and knocked that thing out the ballpark. You know?
When they put you in, you took advantage of it, right?
Exactly. Like my son said, when it was time to shoot, he didn't miss.
So you shot your shot. All right. We love it. We love it.
It went in, Steph Curry style. So.
Now let's talk about, because there's a lot of discussions with gender roles in the marriage, right? Mm-hmm. And what that looks like. Because you got a boss lady for a wife, right? So talk about how do you guys make that work in your relationship, your gender role?
We have a really good partnership. I will share that we do have a traditional marriage in every sense of the word, simply because that's what was modeled for us. And Bryan's parents were married for 30-something years before his dad passed away. My parents have been married now for 60 years. And, my mom was an educator. My father was in management and retail. And so for us, we do what we know. And it was very easy, despite the fact that, I lead a large organization. And even before I owned my own business and Bryan owned his, we worked in Fortune 50, Fortune 10 companies. And so we made a decision that the partnership that would serve both of us would be a traditional marriage. And so he takes care of a lot, in terms of everything external to the home. He manages another business that we had. And he's also very, very involved as a dad. So my primary focus within the home is nurturing our 4 children and making sure that they are equipped and loved and affirmed in every aspect so that they're prepared. And he assists with the big goals for the children, pushing them a little bit harder after mama finishes coddling them, in order to make sure that they are actually achieving and hitting milestones as well. So the traditional marriage seems to work really well for us. It gets overwhelming sometimes, right? Because we can have pressing deadlines associated with work, and maybe both of us have very busy, active traveling, but communication has been a key. If I feel like I'm drowning a little bit in terms of tasks and all the things that I'm managing, I make sure that I'm very clear. I need some help. And he steps in. And sometimes he says, I can't do it. can't do it. We may have to drop one of these balls that we're trying to juggle.
Yeah.
But these are decisions that we make together. So it's been really good.
So now, did you guys sit down and at the early part of your marriage have a conversation around whether or not you were going to be traditional or not? Or did you just kind of fall into that? Can we kind of unpack that a little bit? Like, how did that work in the beginning?
No, for sure. And like Bianca said, we both came from two parent homes. Our parents were a little bit different. Right? My home was a dad dominated home, and he did like everything. And Bianca came from a home where her mother uh, did everything, and she did an amazing job. So from that standpoint, even though we both came from two parent homes, it was with a little bit of a different lens. And so early on, I guess we've gone through three major phases. Um, our first phase of marriage, Bianca was like the primary breadwinner. So she was the engineer, the operations engineer, having come from LSU, and she had an impeccable track record there, and everybody was speaking of her so highly. So she was this legend, and then so I was the eye candy. I was the doting spouse, and then eventually I graduated, and we were as young professionals growing up with two kids, trying to make our way, and eventually we had a third child, and Bianca transitioned from working full time to being a full time mother. And so we did that for several years. And then once we moved here, we had transition when she worked part time, and then became a business owner. So part of the roles were what we saw, but also having an opportunity to focus in on the kids, where I went out and went to work, and she had a chance to stay at home for a period of time. It worked out really well for our family.
Okay. All right. So you guys are more of the traditional roles, and I would say we are too. We're more traditional as well. That just works for us. And you have to do what works for you. You can't. Every marriage is going to be different, and people just have to kind of figure out what works for them. So now, in terms of relationships for single women or men that are wanting to be married, any advice you would have for them, like while they're in their singleness, and then what to expect for marriage?
I would say yes. I mean, if you use my example, my husband came through prayer, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that is the instance that God revealed him to me. And so I would encourage young people or just single people to actually be prayerful. And while you're being prayerful, start preparing as well. So when God brings that intended person into your life, are you ready? Are you ready for that blessing?
Mhm.
Have you worked on yourself physically, mentally, spiritually? Have you uprooted every um, every trauma, every traumatic experience that you encountered? You don't want to bring any baggage into a relationship and then have to work through it. It's so much better if you come in with a clean slate. That means you're giving a prospective partner your very best. And so my encouragement would be to be prayerful and then prepare.
Now, do you feel
That's
like?
that's
Go ahead, Brian.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, do you feel
But
like, Bianca, that when you got married, you had kind of uprooted and done all the work in preparation for marriage? Um, and if so, anything you want to share with the audience?
So, I will say that to the best of my abilities, I had. However, as we continue to engage in our marriage, I learned there were some things that I held on to,
Mm,
offenses and slights and other things that I viewed as traumatic, I didn't know was there. So at the time of our marriage, although we both loved the Lord, that was a foundational piece that was good for us. We were both reared in our respective churches. I was reared a Catholic, he was reared a Baptist, but we had a foundation of faith that our parents provided to us. Our
mhm.
parents were very, very adamant that we would go to church and serve. And his parents, the same way, they opened their homes up for Bible studies and things of that nature. So, to the best of my abilities, I did that, but I did not have all the tools, the spiritual
Mm,
tools at the time. So, there are some things had to that had to come out by prayer and fasting. There are some
right.
things that I had to war to get deliverance over, and so to the best of my abilities, I showed up in this marriage being me. And as God began to reveal, it's almost like an onion, right? And as you continue to pull back the layers, you learn more. So this 25 years, actually, we've been together 27 years, but this 25 years of marriage has been an awesome journey of self discovery.
Mm,
I'm learning him in new ways. He's learning me, but then I'm learning things about myself. And so there have been times that I've been able to say, wait a minute, this isn't of God, or where did this feeling or this emotion, where did this come from? Recognizing tricks of the enemy, and then hey, that's on my prayer list now. Now this is something I need to work on. So
So,
yeah,
what
that's a
about
great
you,
question.
Brian? Great response,
well,
Bianca. What
yeah,
about you?
definitely. So there's this time component, right? So when we got married, we were very early 20s. So um, so you're not expected to have everything figured out. They say my frontal cortex was still developing at that moment. So we're not going to say we had everything, and that's the point of grace, right? So we figured it out. We worked together, and uh, we both haven't had this history of parents who have toughed it out during the tough times and during the good times. Uh, that was an example, right? And so I'm not going to say at 21 when we got married I had the code cracked. It was just we continued to work and the issues weren't that bad. Uh, I knew that some people have like really major issues, and
Right.
so as we were working through it, it's some polishing. It wasn't really the course correcting. So I was happy we figured it out, and every year we have a chance to continue to grow and get better.
Now, you mentioned, Brian, at the top that you guys have 4 kids. Let's talk about how because it's a lot juggling kids and work and businesses, and how do you keep the romance in the relationship?
Yeah.
Anybody?
So
You can go first, Brian.
yeah. No, I mean when you look at my wife, she's very beautiful, so that makes it easy, right?
She is very good.
So that makes it easy to keep the romance alive. But so we were young parents. We're transitioning through, uh, and really focused. So there were levels to some of the outside noise, as they say.
Mm.
So by having going back to the way our family was structured when our kids were young, where I worked, I coached, Cub Scout, Boy Scout leader. Bianca was a teen mom. So a lot of our connectedness was as it related to the kids and sports. And so we're spending time together as a family, and everything really focused around like that family unit. So our internal Bible studies, everything was a real offshoot of the family. But then we had date nights. We had times where we would go to the movies. We had uh, um, this time where I would go home for lunch, and she would make sandwiches, and it was just enough time to go home, see her for about 10 minutes, and then drive back to work. But those were like a great 10-minute break during the day. And so now it's really taking the time, being intentional about spending the time together, and being intentional about carving that time out when you are ultra busy.
Okay.
And I think that romance sometimes, especially with movies and just cinema in general, they have this image of what romance is, but we don't allow it to define romance for us. So romance for us is quality time together. It could be a soft touch, or a hug, or some embrace. Like, that's romance for us. It doesn't mean that he needs to go out and buy 5 dozen roses or in some chocolates to make me feel a certain way. For us, it's a matter of pausing the world and connecting. And we connect. It's important. Another part of romance is sex. Sex is important. I think that so often when we've had an opportunity to talk with and counsel couples, and they feel trapped in sexless marriages, or they have a frequency of about once a week, once every other week. Don't understand it, can't comprehend it. If I need to fuel my body with food multiple times a day to sustain it, the same is true with a healthy marriage. A healthy marriage involves sex, meaningful sex, allowing you to connect in a spiritual way. These things are just so important. And so we have a healthy diet. Like, it's,
I don't know about
I'm not multiple times a day.
Well, I mean, just let's talk about that a little bit, because sex for men is they have to have it, just like they like breathing, right? Women, it's more emotional for us, right? I got to feel close to you and things like that. And so I think for us, that was something that we had to recognize. Like, that was a need for him, just like he had to eat, right? And there's some emotional piece to it that's big, but I couldn't always have to say no. And I think that trips up a lot of couples, because when you start having kids and you're focused on the kids, and you're tired by the time you get to the end of the day as a female, you are just exhausted. You still have to make time for your spouse. And I remember jokingly I said to Terrence, this was probably 20 years ago. Well, how often would you want how often would you want to be intimate? And he thought about it. He said 3 or 4 times a week. I said 3 or 4 times a week? That's a lot. But and we laugh about it now. But it is 3 to 4 times a week.
But I think that what happens though is that for men, we often see that um, as sort of our love language. It's a part of you can say that you love me. Like for women, women, you, it's not enough for me, or sit for my wife. It's not enough for me to tell her that I love her. She needs to feel it that I love her. She needs to feel the love. And sort of the same thing with men. Men, and then Nanette can tell me that she loves me, but it's more important that I feel her love for me. And when, especially early on in the relationship, that's how we sort of interpret it. That's how we translate it. But as you get older, and my body didn't click on all cylinders like it did before. That emotional connection is really important, because that emotional connection is 24/7.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's what's really important to me now. And so, but yeah, it's important. But we filter things through our feelings and our needs, and that is a part of our filter. We filter it. Oh, you don't love me enough because of that, or whatever,
Or lack of.
or the lack of, and it was caused some miscommunication.
So, for you guys, with now that the kids are older, right? How's that? Because they can do for themselves. They're driving. They can get around on their own. Have you seen a difference in your relationship now that the kids are older in terms of your ability to have more time together, to date more? What is that looking like for you?
I think so because we're on our way to becoming empty nesters soon, right? So we have about 3 more years before Bella graduates, and so we're finding that they are more independent. They don't need us at every practice. As a matter of fact, she doesn't even want us at practice. When we go to games that she has to dance in or cheer, he forgets we're supposed to be spectators and he starts cheerleading. He's cheerleading for the cheerleader, right? He's yelling her name like she scored a touchdown. And so, we're at a point where she needs a little bit more independence. And so that creates time for us. So some of the things that we do is, we're very fortunate. We watch a lot of movies together. We talk, we watch shows, and then have conversations about them afterwards, things that we like, seeing each other's point of view. That's been very, very fruitful for us because it's another source of conversation beyond work and children. And I will say, when you have two entrepreneurs, he's the president of his company, I'm the COO of mine. When you have two working, we can bring work home. It can be work 24/7. And so it is about being intentional about having time. And so we do certain things that are our commitments to our marriage. And so that is even carving out time most days before we go to bed. So we have a certain time that we both try to congregate in the room, just so we can start our nighttime routine,
Right.
just so we can have a little time, together. So we are making that time, but it is intentional. There are times that you can't always do that. It's just the nature of it, but we immediately try to correct and make sure we stay on track. So,
Yeah. All right. Anything you wanted to add to that, Brian?
Yeah, just reiteration more than addition, because um, uh, like give me an example. So on Fridays, that's our day to really go to lunch. So yesterday, I called Bianca up and said, "Hey, you want to go grab lunch?" And she couldn't make it. And she was like, "No, I have this going on." But it was an intentional thing, saying, "Hey, let's get together and not let this time," because I traveled early in the week, and we wanted to make sure we did have that time to connect. Um, our kids have been really amazing. So it's been a point of not separation, but in supporting them has been a point of connection. So it's not that they drew us one place and somebody else drew us another place, and it was competing uh, objectives it was more synergistic. So we were able to spend time together and also support the kids.
Well, I think there was something Bianca said earlier about in the romance compartment that it doesn't have to be anything big, right? And I think we learned that early on in our marriage as well. Just, hey, I'm riding to the grocery store. Would you like to ride with me? Or Terrence and I work out together, right? So that is our time to connect. We keep each other as accountability partners, right? Or hey, I'm watching football because that's something that he's really into. So I can have some quality time sitting there talking to him. I can't ask too many questions, but
Right.
I'm interrupting the game, but still, that's our quality time together. And I love the fact that you guys mentioned that you have a routine, because we have a routine as well that we do, that we typically start around 8 o'clock. That's our quality time that we have together before we, go to bed, and that and talking and watching a movie or whatever it is that we're doing at that time. But we are consistent about making sure that we don't bring any work to that.
Gotcha.
We don't have any discussions about work. It's a time for us to just reconnect, and we try to do that on a daily basis. Wouldn't you say, honey?
Yes, we do. But one of the things that we learned is that, especially when our kids were young, we sort of lost ourselves, because it was all about work and the kids. And it's eventually, and one time my mother took the kids for the weekend, and we looked at each other and said, "What are we going to do?" Because that's all we know. Just
Yeah,
work. 'Cause at the time, I was probably working 60, 65 hours a week. And if I wasn't working, I was dealing with the kids. And so we had to be able to say, okay, we need more balance in our lives. And the best way to protect the kids is protect our marriage. So our marriage has to be strong.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so we had to make sure that our marriage stayed tight in order to protect the kids and the like. And so having that balance, having those routines, because marriage is a process. You know,
No, it is.
it's a process, constantly evolving, constantly learning, and constantly rediscovering each other and reconnecting. And so that's one of the things that we learn over the years.
Yeah, and I was always the type that you don't have to give me any flowers. I always felt like flowers was like a waste of money. Like they're gonna die anyway. Like I'm not a big flower person. But now I'm like, okay, you can give me some flowers. I'm okay with flowers now, right?
Yeah, let me
So
ask y'all this: is one of you evening person and the other is a morning person, or do
yeah,
you both feel?
yeah, Terrence is definitely a morning person. And I'm a late person. So, because by 8 o'clock, if I've not had the business conversation with him by 7:30 or 8, it's done. He's like, my
Yeah,
mind doesn't process business after 8 o'clock. On the same token, don't ask me questions at 6:30 in the morning, right? I've got to have my coffee. You got to give me a time to kind of unwind. So you kind of get to know each other and do that. So
Yeah, and that period of from like 8 o'clock until the morning is a sanctuary period. You know what I'm saying? It's safe. You're
yeah,
not bringing in all this other stuff. It's always going to be there. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
work and all of the other type of stuff. So we try to protect that time from, because work is always going to be there. And so that's what we use to sort of protect our peace.
now I know you guys do a lot of counseling with couples. You're very active in the church, and we talk to a lot of couples as well. And one of the things that we find, in addition to what Bianca mentioned earlier, the sex and finding the intimacy time for each other, is also the vulnerability and communication component of it. Like men being vulnerable to their wives and vice versa. So how have you guys been able to be successful at that? In over 25 years.
I think there's been an evolution in our communication over the
Okay.
years. There were times that maybe the way that I crafted or the word choices that I use, they weren't always as productive as it needed to be. And what would happen is that, we have a very loving, jovial relationship, but it would cause shutdown sometimes in communication. And so I had to recognize that, the language choices weren't always conducive to getting the results that I wanted, which is just for him to open up and be more vulnerable. I was creating an environment where he couldn't thrive. And so I believe that being a nurturer in my focus, he said something one time, and it really hurt my feelings. He said, "You're an excellent mother and you're a pretty decent wife." I was like, "What?" I'm excellent at what? What do you mean? And when he said that, it was an opportunity to do some self reflection. The environment that I created for my children to be very free and share their challenges with me, their goals, their aspirations. I didn't necessarily create that for him all the time, right? Where because we're two different personality types. So, he is an early riser. I'm a late night owl. My brain kicks on at like 3 p.m. and I can work to 2 in the morning. Like this is me. That those are some of my most productive times. No one's asking for anything. I can just focus. I can go. And so I've had to adjust a lot of things in order, and so has he, in order to meet in the middle. So we've been very good about making sure we communicate in ways that allow us to be free and vulnerable. One thing that I really love about our relationship is we spend a lot of time together, but we're not clingy. I have always felt empowered to pursue whatever dreams I have. I am a standalone, God fearing, strong leader, and who happens to be a wife and a mother as well, right? And he is a standalone, strong leader who happens to be a husband and a father as well. And we have this environment where we both can thrive. It's not one or the other. It's both of us. And we support each other in our careers as such. But when it comes to levels of, we have these strong personalities, and I have to sometimes remember, take off that hat that I have on that's looking at something from a management point of view. Wait a minute, this is your husband and he's sharing a concern that he has. He doesn't need you to analyze it. He doesn't need you to tell him, well, this is what you should do. You need to be in a position. Terry looking at him next. You see him? I saw that side eye, Terry. I saw that side eye. So sometimes
because Terrence is, we've got our communication down where he says, you know what? I don't need you to, I just need you to be my wife right now. And I just need you to listen, right? I don't need you to fix it. And so I have to be compliant with that because that's what he needs. So.
Correct. And another thing that I noticed in our communication styles, and this is the part of self discovery. I am a talk to think person. If there's something going on, I want to talk about it until I have developed either the strategy for moving forward. He is a think to talk person. So he likes to be quiet. He likes to think about it. And then once he's figured it out, he wants to share it so that we can talk about what his recommendation is for moving forward. I have learned, even in, the times that we've had disagreements or just were misaligned for whatever reasons, I've had to learn to be more in the middle. I can want to talk about it, but I know it's not best for him. So am I most worried about getting a resolution to something that's outstanding in my mind? Or am I more interested in my husband having an environment where he can really think about it, not say what I want to hear him say, but say what's really coming from his heart? I value the latter. And so he also has worked really hard to actually talk and process a little sooner. So because he understands that I don't like open-ended, I love harmony. And so if we don't have harmony, he really has done a great job in recent years to try to process things a little bit quicker so that it's not open-ended for me.
I think that's actually great. It's funny. I want to say this. I want to expand on what you said. Nanette is not only well, you said the first one that you are, but she thinks out loud. You say something, and I'm expecting. She doesn't expect me to respond. She's just thinking about something, and it took me a while to learn that. Okay,
Yeah.
she's not wanting anything from me. She's not expecting me to respond. She's just thinking.
Yeah, yeah. No, look, I feel you.
And as women, we have more words. So sometimes I'll just, we could be riding in the car and I'll just pass by something and say something out loud. And he'll look at me like, what is it you're talking about? So he's, oh, okay. So he realizes now, first of all, I talk a lot. And then second of all, I do think out loud. And he realizes he doesn't have to respond to everything. But going back to what you said about Bryan thinking about things, Terrence is a thinker too, which I appreciate, because a lot of times the thought of taking the time to think about it, he's thought about things I have not considered, right? And I'm trying to rush and make a decision, but he thinks about things I have not considered. What has worked for us is that we say, okay, well, let's talk about that on Wednesday. So that gives him, 3 days to think about it, process it. And then, of course, I always remember to circle back around and say, okay, so where are we on that?
It's on the calendar. It's on the calendar for sure.
If you know me, you know it's on the calendar. If it's not on
Yeah.
And,
so,
one of the things, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah. So one of our, so we're big movie people, and Marvel has the Avengers, and both as a family, as a couple, and individuals, we like those. And there was one scene where Doctor Strange was using the time stone, and he's going through every potential option so that they could have success. And he wasn't communicating with the rest of the team. He was just trying to do that internally. So that's what me and Terry do. We're going through, we're sitting, we're working through, trying to get the words right, saying, hey, if we say this, what's going to be the response? And so we're doing a milestone. It only takes about 2 or 3 days to go through all of those different texts. And then we say something, and you say something different. So
I love that analogy, Bryan. Thank you. And every time he takes his time to think about it, I will remember that analogy. The other thing too with Terrence is, now I don't know if Bryan does this. He sometimes doesn't respond, and he's thinking about it. So now we're to the point where he'll say, I'm thinking, because you ask a question and then he goes quiet, right? So now he says, okay, let me think about it and let me get back to you. Because before I just would repeat the question over again. And he's like, no.
It's word choice. We were trying to make sure, hey,
but then, I'm old enough now to say, okay, then that you process information faster than me. I need some time. Process, think about it.
Yeah.
So
now our last question is, with COVID, we've noticed, a lot of, it's put a strain on some marriages, and people had to realize something different about their marriage or work through some things different about their marriage. So for you guys, what did you learn about your marriage during COVID?
Okay.
So, like you said, COVID was really different in the sense that when you had two people, even though we worked in the same office, she would go on business trips or meeting with clients. I would meet with separate clients. So we weren't always together. even though we worked in the same place. Whereas COVID, we were competing for like the same resource, our office space. We were trying to have conferences, and we're both talking and trying to drive the business, and you were just there all the time. And
why he said there
yeah, exactly. So it didn't give us like a chance to decompress, a break where you're able to do things individually. Everything was connected, and I think you have to take time to do the things that you personally enjoy as an individual, and your spouse does the same. So when you come back together, you're coming back not from a point of both people being depleted or one person being here and the other person is depleted. You're coming together, recharged and refreshed. And so the biggest thing that COVID, whether intentionally or unintentionally, taught me, and I'm not going to say it's the same lesson that Bianca had, was to really take time, disconnect, to recharge, and then come back recharged and in a better mental and spiritual state.
So how were you able to do that, Brian, if you were all in the same house? Did you have 30 minutes you were outside, no one come outside? I mean,
So, it took a while to get there, and then as COVID started to relax a little bit, uh, uh, my oldest daughter works for me, and so we went to the office. So we worked from the office. So that was our chance to really spend time as daughter, dad, and that gave us a little bit of geographic separation. And they say absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? So when you came home, it was, hey, I missed you today, as opposed to, hey, you still here?
What about
So that hopefully gave us a chance to discover the lesson would be to actually put the space into practice.
And for me, I think that, it was different. COVID for me was a time of frustration at times. And it was because this routine that drives our lives, right? We have this master calendar, and, it has on there, who's traveling to where, what everybody's activities are. All of that was shut down, right? And so now the tool that I use to help navigate our lives, wasn't applicable, right? And so for me, the challenges were I had three children. We had three children at home who were learning online, right? There's a different level of support because they're navigating gray space, right? So we had, one in junior high, one in high school, one in college, right? Trying to navigate. And so making sure they were okay. They were isolated from their friends. These are kids that are used to being a part of something, football, track, theater, dance, cheer, and now all of a sudden they're alone. So we had those challenges. And then working professionally, there were challenges obviously in the business. Everyone has experienced that, right? And so here I am as a co-owner of a business trying to navigate how do I help my employees keep food on the table by driving business. So there were a whole host of challenges. I will say for me, the frustrating part was normally, I'm able to change my hats, but because everyone was home, they forgot mom was in COO mode. So I could be in the midst of a Zoom and somebody would start doing sign language, trying to communicate to me, like, what are we eating for lunch? Right? I'm conducting a Zoom with a client. So it was not quite understanding the roles that I had. So for me, the challenge was in order to overcome the frustrations, I needed to be a better communicator. So I developed boundaries. I communicated those boundaries to my family. I expressed to them the need. If I'm in the office, you can't just bust in uh, and talking. You stand at the door. If I acknowledge you, that means come in. So we kind of set up these boundaries that helped us to best navigate it. And then, like Bryan mentioned, once everything began to open up and when our children resume normal activities in school, then, everything else began to, some pressures began to lift off of us. And it seemed more normal. So we made it through, but I will say I felt a need to advocate for myself. Another thing that I did during COVID was I became more active. So I actually spent time outdoors a little bit more. Even if, in the midst of like in between meetings for lunch, maybe I chose to go out and walk outside the neighborhood, outside in the neighborhood for 30 minutes, if that was necessary, or, call one of my other girlfriends just to check in, right? Because, that's what we do. We check on one another just to make sure everybody else's home was operating okay. So those things helped me so that when it was time for he and I to connect, we were on the same page, not frustrated, loving and helping to recharge one another.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Is there anything you wanted to add from our marriage perspective and COVID?
I mean, for us as it relates to COVID, I mean, we have been working together for the last 15 years, and so we work together every day for the last 15 so years or so. I think what it does, it actually enhanced our marriage. Um, and it brought us closer together, which I thought was a surprise. And so and then we really got into start working out, because we were fearful of because I was diabetic, and so I had to address being diabetic. But then we wanted to get stronger because we wanted our immune system to get stronger because we felt that it's not if we get COVID, it's just when.
Yeah.
So we started working out so our immune system would get stronger to combat if we got sick. And in the process of doing that, we just started really just getting closer and now I wouldn't say we're fitness advocates, but we work out a lot.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is I realized that not only did I love him, but I liked him, right?
Yeah.
I liked being around him. He was funny. We liked some of the same things. So I felt like it really helped us reconnect at a deeper level with COVID. Now, of course, we didn't have the challenges of at school learning. Well, we had one that was in college that was doing it, that had learning, but that was just one. I can't imagine with three and what that was like. So, kudos to you guys for getting through that and remaining strong. So, is there anything last you want to leave with the audience in terms of making it to 25 years?
I will say this. I would encourage couples to set goals. And even though we're different, Bryan's not a goal person. He's a process driven person, but I work towards goals. But I would encourage you to set goals. We're here at 25 years because that was something I thought about, prayed about, and asked for. And I'm working towards it. I would say whatever those goals are, if you're looking for more intimacy, change changes that you can make, small changes. I had a pastor say, your future is made up of your daily activities. You can be more in love than you've ever been if you just do one small thing daily towards feeding that aspect of your relationship. So set a goal for your marriage, your relationship. Set a goal for yourself, and then be very diligent in making sure you achieve it. I think that to just say you want to do something and not work towards it. The Bible says, faith without works is dead.
Absolutely.
That is so true. So have integrity in your word. Think about what it is you want. Put it before the Lord, and then work for it.
Beautiful. What about you, Bryan?
Amen.
Okay. Well, then we'll end it with that. You guys have been wonderful, Bryan and Bianca Jackson, and I'm so glad that you said yes to this project that we're doing. And I think that your testimony is going to bless a lot of people. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you so